They knew now that someone else was watching. The second step wasn't planned by me. It came from a relative who called out of the blue. "Hey," they said, "I just wanted to check on you. Your parents mentioned some problems." I went quiet for a moment. What did they say? That you've been different. That money went to your head. That you're shutting them out. They sounded really upset. Said they're just trying to guide you and you're turning on them. I listened, holding the phone a little tighter. Old me would have rushed to smooth it over, laughed, said, "You know how parents are, they worry too much." Instead, I took a breath and said calmly, "Can I tell you my side?" They hesitated, then, "Yeah, go ahead." So I did, not every tiny detail, not every emotion, just the facts. They opened my legal mail. They called my lawyer without telling me. They called my boss to suggest I might be unstable. They made photocopies of my documents and started filling out forms with their names as added parties. They threatened to kick me out if I didn't change the trust. On the other end, I heard a slow, stunned exhale. "Did you document any of this?" they asked quietly. "Yes," I said. "I have the copies. I've talked to my lawyer. I'm not trying to destroy them. I'm just protecting what was legally left to me." There was a long pause. "I didn't know it was like that," they said finally. "They made it sound like you were hoarding money while they starved." I didn't say anything. "They didn't mention calling your work," they added, "or the forms. That's not okay." That's when I realized something important. My parents' version of the story depended on no one asking follow-up questions. Once someone did, it started to fray. They tried to do damage control. I heard snippets of conversations later. "I don't know why she's blowing this out of proportion. She's so sensitive. We just asked her to help. Kids today call that pressure." But every time they told the partial version, they left out a piece. And the people they spoke to weren't stupid. One relative called me instead of them next time they heard an update. Another quietly messaged me, "If you ever need a place for a bit, let me know. No questions." Maybe they didn't fully understand. Maybe they didn't want to. But the certainty my parents had, the unshakable confidence that everyone would be on their side, started to crack. At home, the shift was subtle. They still held themselves like victims, sighed loudly, talked on the phone where I could hear phrases like, "We don't know what we did wrong," but something in their tone changed when they said my name. Less ownership, more caution. One afternoon, I came home to find them at the dining table with another relative and a familiar logo on a folder, the law firm. They'd asked someone to mediate. An older cousin who worked in admin somewhere, not even a lawyer, but close enough that they could say they were seeking advice. I walked in, set my bag down, and sat when they motioned. The cousin cleared their throat. "So, they're worried. You're worried. This doesn't have to get ugly." "I don't want it ugly," I said. "I just don't want to be coerced." The words seemed to land heavier than the others. The cousin opened the folder. "I spoke to your lawyer's office, briefly. They confirmed the trust is solid and that your situation is not unusual. Not unusual." I saw it in my parents' eyes, how much they hated that phrase, being told they were like anyone else, that their special story of sacrifice didn't override basic rules. "We're just asking for fairness," they cut in. The cousin looked at them, then at me. "You are not entitled to her inheritance," they said, voice even. "Legally or morally, help is a favor, not a debt." It was such a simple sentence, but it landed like a stone dropped into water, ripples spreading out. They tried to argue, talked about raising me, bills, how love should be repaid. The cousin didn't shout, didn't accuse, they just said, "You're talking about parenting like a loan shark talks about interest." Silence. No one had ever said that to them before. Not from someone they respected. I watched their faces carefully. I saw, for the first time, something like uncertainty. Like the script they'd been using for months suddenly had missing lines. The cousin turned back to me. "If they threaten you again, housing, work, reputation, document it. If they try to access your accounts, we'll help you involve the right people. Okay?" I nodded, throat tight. "Okay." They didn't say you're right. They didn't say they're monsters. They just said, You're not crazy. You're not ungrateful. You're allowed to keep what was given to you. Those were the words that started doing quiet damage to my parents' image, not just in the family, but to themselves. They could no longer say, everyone agrees you're wrong. Now it was, some people are taking your side because you've manipulated them. But every time they added that layer, calling others gullible, suggesting I was twisting things, they made themselves look more desperate. My boss never got another concerned call. The relatives who used to hear only their version now heard mine too. In my calm, flat voice, with dates and times instead of tears, nothing exploded. No one disowned anyone. But invitations dried up a little. People stopped asking my parents for advice about their difficult kids. A few gently mentioned boundaries. Others said nothing at all, but looked different around them. In our house, the air changed. They started bringing up the inheritance less. Talked more about their own plans, their own struggles, in a tone that sounded almost like complaint to an equal, not command to a subordinate. The monster they'd tried to unleash, public shame, pressure, isolation, had turned around slowly, not to devour them, just to stand beside me and say, quietly, this is what happened. And once the truth was out in that simple, unembellished way, their most powerful tool, other people's blind sympathy, was something they could never fully control again. Time didn't fix anything between us. It just made the shape of what had happened clearer. We moved into a strange sort of truce. No more direct threats, no more co-trustee talk, no more calls to my job, at least none that I ever heard about. On the surface, life looked almost normal again. We ate at the same table, talked about grocery prices and traffic, watched the same shows, commenting on strangers' drama instead of our own. Underneath, something fundamental had shifted. They knew now there were limits, that I was willing to involve other people. That family matter wasn't a magic phrase that made everything acceptable. I finished my last semester at home by habit more than choice, counting weeks, then days. The money from my part-time job, tip by tip, had become a quiet escape fund, deposit after small deposit until it was enough for a security deposit and first month's rent in a cramped but clean apartment across town. The trust stayed untouched through all of it. That was important to me. I wanted to know I could build something on my own work first. When I finally told them I was moving out, I did it in the most ordinary way possible. I came home early, stood just inside the living room. My lease starts next month, I said. I'll start moving things out this weekend. They stared at me like I'd spoken another language. Where? One of them finally asked. I told them. A small place, shared building, nothing flashy. I made sure they heard what it wasn't. A big, showy rebellion, a luxury escape funded by the trust. You don't have to do this, they said, more stunned than angry. You have a room here. We're family. I met their eyes. You told me I needed to find out what it's like without this roof, I said quietly. I'm just taking you at your word. They flinched. They didn't remember the line the way I did, as a turning point, a fracture. For them, it was probably just something said in heat, like dozens of other lines they'd thrown out to control me over the years. But once words are out, they don't go back in. Packing was slow, careful. I folded shirts that still smelled like childhood detergent, wrapped old photos in newspaper, left furniture they'd bought, took books I'd chosen. There were no big fights, just small, sharp comments. So you're really doing this? Running away because people asked you to share. Enjoy your freedom. Don't come crying back when it's hard. I didn't argue, I just kept filling boxes. The real consequences for them didn't arrive as some dramatic punishment. They came in quiet, permanent ways. A holiday invitation that used to go to the whole family now included a separate text to me. You're always welcome to come on your own. A cousin who used to call them for advice about their teenager started calling me instead, asking, how would you feel if your parents said this? I'd answer honestly, calmly, without poison. I'd feel controlled. I'd feel like they didn't trust me. I'd feel scared. I heard later that my parents complained. She's turning people against us. She made us look like monsters, but they could never quite explain how, not without admitting all the things they'd done. So they stuck to vague accusations. She's ungrateful. She exaggerates. The problem was, I didn't have to exaggerate. The facts were bad enough. They learned that the hard way when one of the relatives they'd vented to finally said, "You opened her legal mail?" In that slow, disbelieving tone, that means, "You know that's not normal, right?" That relative pulled away a little after that. Still polite, but cooler. Fewer favors, more boundaries. At work, my boss gave me more hours, then a promotion. Not because of what had happened at home, but because I kept showing up, doing my job, staying steady. When I mentioned I was moving, he nodded. "You'll do fine," he said. "You're the most reliable 18-year-old I've met." Reliable. A word my parents had used before, but only when it meant obedient. Out there, it meant something else, trustworthy, dependable, mine. I set up my new place slowly, a mattress on the floor at first, an old secondhand table, mismatched chairs from a thrift store. I hung one photo on the wall, the only one I had of me with the relative who'd left me the inheritance. I didn't frame it in gold, just a simple, cheap frame. But I straightened it 3 times until it felt right. Weeks turned into months. I still saw my parents sometimes, short visits, coffee, not overnight stays. We talked about neutral things, the weather, work, traffic. They brought up money less and less, never the trust directly. They'd learned that every time they tried to twist that story, they risked someone asking questions they couldn't answer. The biggest, most irreversible consequence came not from me, but from time. They had believed deeply that I needed them more than they needed me, that their approval was oxygen, that their roof was shelter I couldn't live without. Watching me pay my own rent, buy my own groceries, make my own decisions in small, consistent ways, it broke something in that belief. I saw it in their eyes every time I declined something gently. "No, I can't lend you from the trust. It's locked for my future." "No, I won't put your name on anything. It's not appropriate." "No, I'm not cutting anyone off. If they ask me what happened, I'll tell them the truth." No shouting, no revenge speeches. Just simple, repeated, immovable no's. Their reputation didn't explode in some scandal. It eroded. One story at a time, one honest answer at a time, one missing favor at a time. I think the real justice, the thing that will never go back to how it was, is this. They used to be able to say, "We sacrificed everything for her," and have everyone nod along. Now when they say it, there's always at least one person in the room who's heard my side. Who knows about the opened mail, the copied forms, the threats, the calls to my job? The myth of them as the endlessly giving martyrs is gone. In its place is something smaller, more human, more flawed. They're not villains in everyone's eyes, but they're not unquestioned heroes anymore either. And that, for them, is a kind of punishment they never saw coming. I didn't ruin their lives. I just refused to carry their version of the story alone. In the end, their biggest fear came true. Not that I'd waste the money, or cut them off completely, or run wild. What they were really afraid of was much simpler. That other people would see what I'd seen. That someone besides me would look at their choices and say, "No, that wasn't love. That was control." The inheritance is still there. The trust they tried to break is intact. The other trust, the one between us, never recovered. Sometimes, on quiet nights in my little apartment, I run my fingers over the edge of that framed photo and think about the person who started all of this by believing in me. I used to feel guilty for keeping what they left. Now I understand. They didn't just give me money. They gave me the one thing my own parents never meant to. A way out that didn't require me to become as cruel as they were. In the end, I didn't have to destroy them. The truth did what I couldn't bring myself to do. It took their favorite weapon, shame, and handed it back to the only people who'd truly earned it.